We begin the Gemara Yuma, Pei Beis Medalef, the Mishnah. Zog the Mishnah Hatinoikais. When it comes to children, Ein Ma'ananaisan b'Yom Kippurim. We're not obligated to hold them back from eating on Yom Kippur. In other words, Menatayra, they're not obligated to fast. Aval, however, Mechanchanaisan, we do give them chinuch, we train them into this, and when does the mitzvah of chinuch begin? So the Mishnah here says, Lefnei Shana, before the year. When the Mishnah says the year, what is the Mishnah referring to? So Rashi explains, the year before the mitzvah, so by a boy, the year from 12 to 13, by a girl in the year from 11 to 12, is the year that the Mishnah is talking about. Rashi says that's what's called Samoch Lepirkan, that year in the time before they become bar mitzvah. So Lefnei Shana means a year before that year. Or Lefnei Shnasayim means 2 years is considered to be Samoch Lepirkan, and then 1 year before that. So in short, what the Mishnah is saying is, you begin being mechanach them to fast 2 years before and 3 years before. Shvil, shiur, regilim b'mitzvahs. In order that the children should be accustomed to doing mitzvahs. So this is b'chlal, the chiyuv of chinuch, that a father is obligated to be mechanach his child to do mitzvahs. There's a fundamental question that is asked over here in the Taisus Yishanim, that there's a famous Gemara in Yevamis that says that if you see a child being oiva a isser, you're not obligated to separate him. You're not allowed to feed him an isser, but you're not obligated to separate him. So the question is, right over here it says that you have to be mechanach a child, that he should be regilim b'mitzvahs. So why don't you have to be mechanach him? The same thing when you get to Yisurim, you should have to separate him. So the Taisus Yishanim brings two answers. One answer he brings from Rabbi Elazar Mimitz, which is the Bala Yereim, and he said that the whole din of chinuch is only regarding mitzvahs, not regarding Yisurim. That's what you see from our mission over here. The mitzvah to fast on Yom Kippur is not an Isur, the Nisim is nafsheseichem, it's a mitzvah, and that there's a chiyuv of chinuch for. Another answer he says that over here, we're talking about the chiyuv of chinuch of the father. And just like our Mishnah says regarding this, the Gilim b'mitzvahs, regarding the mitzvah of Inui, the same would apply regarding Yisurim as well, that a father has to separate his child from Yisurim. The Gemara in Yevamis that says you don't have to separate, that's not talking about the father. That's talking about the Bezdin or B'chlal, Klal Yisrael, that they're not mechuyev to separate a child that they see that's eating a Isser. Zok the Gemara, hashta. Now that it said in the Mishnah, B'fnei Shtayim, Mechanchen Lahu, that before the 2 years that are close to his bar mitzvah, in other words, 3 years before, we're mechanechim not to eat, B'fnei Shana, Miboya, so a year before that year before his bar mitzvah, for sure you have to be mechanechim as well. So why does the Mishnah give these two shiurim here? A year before his bar mitzvah, and then a year before the 2 years before his bar mitzvah. Amar Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda answers, Lo Kashya. It's not a question because the Mishnah is talking about two different kinds of children. Ha b'chayla. When the Mishnah says that the chinuch begins 2 years before the bar mitzvah, it's talking about a child that's a chayla. And Rashi says chayla means a child that's weak and doesn't have the koyach to fast. And ha b'body. When it says that the chinuch begins 3 years before the bar mitzvah, it's talking about a child that's strong and healthy and he's able to fast even earlier. This is the way Rav Chisda learned this Mishnah. The Gemara here is going to bring other opinions regarding when you begin being machanach a child, and then go back and see how it fits into the Mishnah. Amar Rav Huna said, and as we'll see in the conclusion of Rav Huna's words, he's speaking about a girl, which her bas mitzvah is of course from 12 years old. So Rav Huna says, ben ches, even though he uses a lashon of ben, which is a lashon zacha, but it's speaking about a girl. Ben ches u ben tes, from 8 years old, in other words, a girl that's strong enough, you begin being mechanachor from 8, uben tes. A girl that's not as strong, you begin being mechanachor from 9 years old. Mechan chanoisai l'shois. So the chinuch is that she begins fasting some hours. In other words, whenever she's used to eating every day, so you delay her eating another hour or so later. Ben Yod uben Yud Aleph, from the age of 10 and 11, in other words, either 1 or 2 years before the bas mitzvah, mashlimin midrabanan. So then she's obligated to fast midrabanan, the full fast. Ben Yud Beis, when she's 12 years old, mashlimin midoraisa. then she's obligated to fast minat Torah. Once she's that age, so then it doesn't make a difference if she's weak or if she's strong. She's obligated to fast minat Torah. That's what Rav Huna said, and he concludes and says, "B'tinoikis." We're talking about a girl. Rav Nachman Amar, and Rav Nachman says, and according to Rashi's Pshat, Rav Nachman is saying the same as Rav Huna. He's just applying it to a tinnik, to a boy. Ben Tes, from the age of 9, when his child is strong enough. Ben Yud, from the age of 10, child is not as strong. Mechan Chanaysin L'shois. We're mechanach the child to fast hours. Ben Yud Aleph, Ben Yud Beis, from 11 years old and from 12 years old. Mashlimin Midrabanan. Then, a year or two before the Bar Mitzvah, you have to fast Midrabanan, the full fast. Ben Yud Gimel, when the child is Bar Mitzvah, 13 years old, Mashlimin Midairaisa. Then he has to fast the full fast, Minat Torah. B'tinnik. And he's saying regarding a tinnik, regarding a boy. So as I mentioned, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman are saying the same thing. There are 3 stages here. In other words, there's the time when you're there's the time that you mechanach to fast only shois, either 3 or 4 years before the Bar Mitzvah or Bas Mitzvah. And then there's the year or 2 before the Bar Bas Mitzvah where you have to fast fully. And then comes the Chiyuv Minat Torah by Bar Bas Mitzvah. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees and says, Hashlame de Rabbanon leke. There is no halacha of fasting the full fast in the Rabbanon before your Bar Mitzvah. And rather, Ben Yud Aleph, a year or 2 before the Bar Mitzvah, Machanchen Oisai L'shois. Then, chinuch, yes, you have to be mechanach, but only to fast additional hours, more to eat later than he usually eats. Ben Yud Beis, mashlimim midayraisa. 12 years old, by a girl, so then she fasts the full fast minat Torah, and by a boy from 13 years old. So Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold of the concept that there's such a thing to fast the full fast with the Rabbanon. You mechanach l'shois a year or 2 before the Bar Mitzvah. So now let's see how this fits into the Mishnah. Talk to Gemara Tanan. So in the Mishnah we learned Tatinoikos Eiman and Oisam B'Yom Kippurim. They do not have to fast Yom Kippur. Avol Machanchen Oisam Lifnei Shana V'Lifnei Shtayim. But we're machanech them a year before the year of their Bar Mitzvah. In other words, again, the Lifnei Shana means a year before that year before the Bar Mitzvah, 2 years before. And Lifnei Shtayim means that a year before 2 years before the Bar Mitzvah. So that's 3 years before. So how do we learn Pshat in this Mishnah? We saw before Rav Chisda's Pshat that he said the Mishnah is talking about 2 different scenarios, a child that's a body, a child that's a chayla. How would this fit according to Rav Huna, Rav Nachman, Rav Yochanan? Bishleim Rav Huna v'Rav Nachman. So the Mishnah could be interpreted according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman's opinion, and we'll explain as follows. As we'll see here, the Gemara is going to say that according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, when it says Lefnei Shana and Lefnei Shtayim, it's not talking about 2 different shiurim for a child that's strong or a child that's weak. They're both talking about the same child, and the expression of Shana and Shtayim is saying the same thing in a different way. As the Gemara will now explain the Mishnah. So Lefnei Shana, V'Lefnei Shtayim, what would that mean? Lefnei Shana li divrayim. Lefnei Shana means a year before the year before you're supposed to fast midrabanan. So as Rashi explains, we're talking over here about the chiyuv midrabanan to fast for a child which is a chayla. What did Rav Huna and Rav Nachman say regarding a child which is a chayla? From when do they have to start fasting the full fast midrabanan? 1 year before the Bar Bas Mitzvah. Right? So when it says Lefnei Shana, so the expression of Lefnei Shana always means 2 years before that. So 2 years before the year that they're obligated to fast midrabanan. Okay? So that would be 3 years before the Bar Bas Mitzvah. That's the meaning of Lefnei Shana. It's 2 years before they have to fast midrabanan, but it's 3 years before they have to fast minat Torah. And therefore, when the Mishnah continues and says V'Lefnei Shtayim, what does that mean? So the Bach here tells you what the Girsa is. Lefnei Shtayim l'divrei Torah. That would be a year, a year before, 2 years before when they have to fast minat Torah. So that would be, again, 3 years before when they're mechuyev to fast minat Torah, and 2 years before when they're mechuyev to fast midrabanan. which again, by a girl, this is at the age of 9. So this would fit according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Again, so the point here is that both according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, when the Mishnah said Lifnei Shana and Lifnei Shnasayim or Lifnei Shtayim, it's not talking about, like Rav Chisda said, a child which is a body and a child that's a chayla. It's talking about a child which is a chayla. And regarding a child which is a chayla, you begin being mechanech them l'shois, to fast shois. When do you begin being mechanech this child l'shois? So as Rav Huna said, that's by a girl, that's at age 9, 3 years before her bas mitzvah. Or by a boy, Rav Huna said, that's at age 10, which is 3 years before the bar mitzvah. So how does 3 years before the bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah fit into this lashon of lefnei shana and lefnei shtayim? Because lefnei shana refers to the chiyuv midrabanan, which is 1 year before the bar mitzvah, and lefnei shana means 2 years before that, so that's 3 years before the bar mitzvah. And lefnei shnasayim, which means that it's 3 years before, so that refers to 3 years before the bar mitzvah min ha-Torah. So therefore, it's one and the same thing. That's the pshat according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, so it can fit. Ela Rav Yechanan, but according to Rav Yechanan's opinion, kashya. So there's a question, what was Rav Yechanan's opinion? Rav Yechanan said, there's no such a thing of being mechanach l'sha'is 4 years before the bar mitzvah for a healthy child, or 3 years before for a weak child, like Rav Huna and Rav Nachman said. 1 or 2 years before the bar mitzvah is when you have to fast the full fast in the Rabbanon. So how do we put that into the words of the Mishnah, Lefnei Shana and Lefnei Shtayim, which means that the chinuch begins 2 or 3 years before, not 1 or 2 years before. So it doesn't fit according to Rav Yechanan. That's the question over here. Amalach Rav Yechanan, so Rav Yechanan says, "My Shana Shtayim Samach LePirkon." From Rashi, actually, it seems like you changed the girsa. It's not my, but it's Eime. Eime, you have to read the Mishnah, take out the word Lefnei. Shana Oishtayim Samach LePirkon. The chinuch to fast Sha'is begins a year or 2 before the bar mitzvah. In other words, when the Mishnah said Lefnei Shana and Lefnei Shnasayim, that's the reason why we say that it doesn't mean a year before or 2 years before, but it means Lefnei, a year before the bar mitzvah, or a year before 2 years before the bar mitzvah. So therefore, the Mishnah would mean 2 or 3 years before. That's a problem with Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. So Rabbi Yechanan says, we take out the word lefnei, and therefore the Mishnah means exactly like he said, a year or 2 before the bar mitzvah is when you have to start fasting hours. Toshama, the Gemara brings a braise where it says like Rabbi Yechanan, the Tane Rabbe Bar Shmuel, Tinoikes, children, ein ma'anais b'yom kippurim. They're not obligated to fast Yom Kippur, but we do train them to fast Shana Ishtayim Samach LePirkon, a year or 2 before the bar mitzvah. Bishlam Rabbi Yechanan, so it's according to Rabbi Yechanan the Nicha, this is understood. Rabbi Yechanan, it's clear here. This Mishnah is saying exactly like Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. It does not say the term lefnei. It says Shana Oishtayim Samach LePirkon, a year or 2 before the bar mitzvah. El Rav Huna Rav Nachman Kashya, but according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, so there's a question here. Why does it say a year or 2 before? If according to them the chinuch begins before that, it begins if it begins for the chinuch of shois, it begins already 4 or 3 years before, and for the chinuch to fast the full hours, it begins 2 or 3 years before. So why does it say over here in the Mishnah Shana Ishtayim, and that's all? So the Gemara answers, Amalach Amri Lach Rabbanon. So these 2 Rabbanon, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, answer you, My Chinuch Nami Diktani, when it says over here Chinuch, that you mechanach them to fast a year or 2 before Shlama. It means to fast, the full fast. So I just made a mistake a second ago. I said that according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, you fast 2 or 3 years before that. No, you don't. You fast a year or 2 before the full fast. So that's exactly what this Braisa is speaking about. Rav Huna and Rav Nachman said that you fast sha'os 3 or 4 years before, but you have to fast the full fast 2 or 1 year before, and that's exactly what this Braisa is saying. It's talking about the full fasting, a full fast with the Rabbanon. Fragt the Gemara, mi kari lechinuch hashlama. Do you refer to fasting the full fast with the term hashlama? Is this what's called chinuch? that you're only being mechanech them? The lashon of the Braisa was mechanchen oisan l'shana. Do we refer to the full fast with the term of chinuch? But v'hatanya, we learned in the Braisa, it says, Eize chinuch, what is considered to be being mechanech a child for fasting? A child that fasts 2 hours, so he has to fast now. He has to be given to eat, that is, and within 3 hours in the day. If he was used to eating 3 hours in the day, we give him to eat an hour later, on the 4th hour of the day. So that's chinuch. So over here, when it says that's referring to fast. That's referring to being mechanech l'shois, like we explained according to the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan, not being mechanech hashlomet, to fast fully. That's not called chinuch. Today, chinuchi hava. There are 2 different expressions of chinuch. There are 2 levels of chinuch, 2 stages. There's a stage of chinuch where you're fasting additional hour, and there's the stage of chinuch when you have to fast a full day. One Braisa is talking about chinuch for shois, and the Braisa over here, is talking about the chinuch of fasting the full day, and that fits according to Rav Hunan of Nachman's opinion when it's a year or 2 before the bar mitzvah. Zok the Gemara, Zok the Mishnah. Before I go to the Mishnah, if I could just mention the halacha that the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch. So the Alter Rebbe paskins that a child should start fasting from 9 years old or 10 years old, so then he begins fasting shois. That's midrabanan. And the Alter Rebbe here brings from our Gemara. There's actually different ways how to learn this Gemara. The Riv has a different girsa in our Gemara, completely different way. Rav Hunan and Rav Nachman, they're arguing. Akopanim, the Alter Rebbe paskins that you begin for shois to be mechanech them from 9 and 10 years old. In other words, 4 or 3 years before the bar mitzvah, to give them to eat later in the day. From 11 years old, the Alter Rebbe says, then they should be fasting the full day, and that's both. The Alter Rebbe says there's no difference between a zachar and a keva. That's one opinion. Then the Alter Rebbe brings Rabbi Yechanan, the second opinion, that from 11 years old and 12 years old for a zachar, the chinuch is only l'shais. You don't fast the full day, like Rabbi Yechanan said. You never fast you don't have to fast in the Rabbanan the full day. You just mechanech l'shais. And the Alter Rebbe finishes off the Ikir is Kisvara Harishayna, that you should be mechanech l'shais from already age 9 and 10, and then from 11 you should fast the full day. But if it's hard, so then you could only be mechanech l'shais from age 11, like the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan. Zok the Mishnah, Ubra Shehiricha Machile Noisai. So Ubra Shehiricha refers to a woman that's pregnant, and the Ubra, so as Rashi explains, this is really the fetus that is smelling food, and therefore the woman becomes desperate to eat, and if she's not going to eat, so Rashi says this will put into danger both the mother and the child. That's what Rashi says. So from Rashi it seems that the only reason why it would be allowed for her to eat, as the Mishnah here will say, is because both of their lives are in danger. If only the child's life is in danger, but not the mother, so then maybe it wouldn't be allowed for her to eat. But in other Rishonim it says clearly, even if only the child's life is in danger, it would be allowed for the mother to eat to save his life. Machila noisa, so we give her to eat acha toshev nafsha, until she calms down and her life is out of danger. Chayle machila noisa, a person that's sick and has to eat, we give him to eat al pi bekiyin. If there are 2 doctors that are professionals and say that he has to eat, we give him to eat. If there are no bekiyin there, machila noisa al pi atzmai, we give him to eat when he himself is saying that he has to eat, until he says that it's enough, that he doesn't have to eat anymore. So we learned in the Braisa regarding Bechlal, giving an ubar to eat isurim when she feels desperate that she has to eat something. Ubra shehiricha b'sar kodesh, a ubar that she smells and she has a taiva to eat from b'sar kodesh, it's not allowed for her to eat, or to eat chazer, which is not kosher. So we don't immediately give her to eat. We try to calm her down first by sticking a spindle into the gravy and placing it in her mouth, and she can suck from it and calm herself down. We place it on her mouth. If she calmed down, mutiv. So then good. V'im lav, and otherwise if not, then we give it to drink, to eat from the gravy itself. V'im nisyashva daitav, she calms down, mutiv, and that's good. Then we give it to eat from the fats of the meat itself that she's not allowed to eat. There's nothing that stands in the place of pekuach nefesh if her life is in danger. But even here, as we see, as the Rishonim explain, we don't immediately run to give her something which is asur. We try to calm her down without giving her from the actual isur. Besides the three Avedas of Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayis and Shvichas Damim, where we're not allowed to be over any of these Avedas in order to save someone's life. Avodah Zarah minalan, so the Gemara brings a source for this. From where do we know regarding Avodah Zarah that you can't be over Avodah Zarah to save someone's life? The Tanya, we learned in Abraisa, Rabbi Elazar said, Im nemar b'chol nafshecha. When the Torah says b'chol nafshecha, lama nemar. Why does it have to say? Sorry, Im nemar b'chol nafshecha. If the Torah writes already that b'chol nafshecha meaning you have to give up your life, lama nemar b'chol ma'idcha. Why does the Torah have to write b'chol ma'idcha, which refers to a person that has to give up all his money for a mitzvah? V'im nemar b'chol ma'idcha, lama nemar b'chol nafshecha. If it says b'chol ma'idcha, why does it have to say b'chol nafshecha? What the Gemara is asking is, if one is more difficult than the other, so then let it say one and we'll know the other. So the answer is, if you have a person that his body is more cherished to him than his money, so therefore for him it's more difficult to give up his life. So therefore the Torah says that he should even be ready to give up his life. And if you have a person that is ready to risk his life and his money is more important than his body, so then so the Torah is saying that he should be ready to give up all his money for the Isser of Avodah Zarah, which is what it's talking about over here, and not to serve Avodah Zarah. So therefore we see from here the chiyuv to give up your life and not to serve Avodah Zarah. This applies both in the case where a person is being forced to serve Avodah Zarah, or in a case of saving a person's life through using something from Avodah Zarah. As the Gemara explains in Shabbos, taken from an Asheda to heal a person. Gilui Arayis and Shvichas Damim Yinalon. From where do we know that Gilui Arayis and Shvichas Damim are not are Avedas where a person has to give up his life? The Tanya we learned in Abraisa, Rebbe Yomer, it says, Ki kashe yakum ishare eyo ritzachai nefesh, kein adavar hazeh. Like when a person comes to murder someone, the same is in this case. What is this talking about? Someone that's being ma'anis, a naira ha'mayrasa. So in this case of a naira ha'mayrasa, it says, it's compared, what he is doing, this act, this relationship is similar to going and murdering someone. So the question is, why is the Torah comparing what this person is doing to a ritzeach? What do we learn out from ritzeach, from a murderer, to this case? Elo, so the answer is, we're using the case of a ritzeach to compare and learn out to this case, but v'nimtza lomit, but we actually can learn out from here, from this case of a person being ma'anis, a naira meirasa, to a ritzeach. Ma'anara meirasa, just like here in this case, by the naira meirasa, nitin latzila benafshay, so you're allowed to save her from this person that's coming, that's running after her to be ma'aniser, by killing that person, as the pasuk there says. So this is what's called a raidif. When he's running after her to be ma'aniser, so he's called a raidif, and therefore you're allowed to kill him in order to save the girl. For ritzeach, the same applies also to a ritzeach, person that's chasing someone to murder him. He's a raidif, and you're allowed to kill him. So we learn that out from what it says here in this pasuk by Nara Meirasa, that you're allowed to kill him. But we also learn out from ritzeach to Nara Meirasa. Ma ritzeach, just like by ritzeach, the halach is Yehorig val yaver, that you have to be ready to die and not be over in this. If someone tells you, go and kill somebody, and if not, they'll kill you, so you have to die yourself. Af naira meirasa, we compare, the Torah is comparing ritzeach to naira meirasa as well, Yehorig val yaver. If someone comes and tells you that you must go have this relationship with that naira meirasa, otherwise I'll kill you, so Yehorig val yaver has to be ready to die and not be over on this. So Rashi here is medayik the lashon of the Gemara. It says yeh hareg, referring to the man, that he has to be ready to die and not have this relationship with his girl. But regarding a woman, it does not say te hareg, that she should be ready to die. if someone is forcing her to have a relationship with someone. And Rashi says the reason is because the man is the one doing the action. The woman is compared to a karka ilam, which is the expression the Gemara says regarding Esther. When she went, she got married to Achashverosh. And therefore, by a woman, this obligation to give up your life does not apply. That's what Rashi says. And there's a very lengthy thesis over here as well that talks about the same point. And thesis over here brings a few different opinions about this. Why regarding the woman and the case of Esther specifically, which is what Rashi brings as the proof that this is not applied to a woman. Why there it doesn't apply? So Taisus brings another pshat. The reason it doesn't apply by Esther is because she had no hanav from it, and the Isser of Gilui Arayis is only the hanav davera, and she had no hanav. But Taisus says Lo Nehire, doesn't agree with this. Another pshat Taisus brings from Rabbeinu Tam is that in the case of Esther, we're talking about a relationship with a guy, and the Isser does not apply. This Yeharik Valyava does not apply by the relationship with a guy. There's also a machlekes about this in Taisus. Those are the few pshatim that there are regarding Esther, why she didn't give up her life. Now, the Gemara said that we're learning this out from Ritzeach, that by Ritzeach, you have to be ready to give up your life and not murder someone else. So regarding a Ritzeach, what's the source that he has to be ready to give up his life? So the Gemara answers, Svari. It's the Svara. It's logical. There's an individual that came to Rava or to Rabbe, and he said to Rabbe, the master, the person that is the Paritz, the master of my village, said to me, Katle leplanya, go ahead and kill this person, v'iloi, and if not, katlina loch, I'm going to kill you. So what should I do? So he said to him, Niktalach, you should allow them to kill you, v'loi tiktal, and you should not kill another Yid. Why? Here's the svara. My chaz is the domedidach sumuk. What do you see that your blood is redder and you should save your life? Maybe the blood of the other person is redder and therefore you should save his life. So as Rashi explains, the basis of what the Gemara is saying over here is, usually when it comes to all mitzvahs, you're allowed to be oived on a mitzvah and you don't have to be ready to die, because the pasuk says v'chai behem, v'lo shiyamus behem, which means that the Eibusha gives us only the mitzvahs to fulfill them if we'll remain alive, not to die. So when the Torah says that, reason is because the life of a Yid is more cherished to the Eibusha than the fulfillment of mitzvahs. So therefore, if you want to apply that over here in this case, the Isser of not killing another Yid, and you're going to say that my life is more important because the Eibusha cherishes my life, v'chai behem. But over here in this case, someone is going to die, either you or the other person. So the life of the Yid is not going to be preserved here. So therefore you have to be mevatel this, it's not going to be v'chai behem. So therefore the svara comes in, how do you know that your life is more important than the other person? If you can't fulfill the v'chai behem, so then how do you know whose blood is redder? So therefore you have to be ready to die. You can't apply the v'chai behem in this case. That's Rashi's pshat. So there's a famous shaila in the Achreinim. Does the Gemara mean that you have to be ready to die misafik? Because we don't know. That's what it seems. But others say no. The Gemara is saying it in this way of Dilma, but really the Gemara means to say b'derech vadai. Since anyway someone is going to die and you can't apply the v'chai behem, which is the only source to say that by all mitzvahs you don't have to be ready to die, so therefore over here the whole pasuk v'chai behem doesn't apply, so you have to be ready to die. The Gemara comes back to the halach of Yom Kippur, the halach of the Mishnah. Hahi ubre de orcha. There was an ubra, a woman that was pregnant, that smelled food in Yom Kippur, and she became desperate to eat. Asul kamei de Rebbe. They came to Rebbe. What should they do? Should they give it to eat or not? Amaluhu, he said to them, Zilu lechushula, go and whisper into her ears, the Yom Kippuruhu, that it's Yom Kippur today. And let's see if it will calm her down. Lechushula, they whispered it into her ears, ve'ilchasha, and she accepted it and she calmed down. Kari alea, so he said in her the pasuk, B'terem atzarcha, before you were formed, B'beten yedaticha, even in the womb, you already know the Eibishter. The Eibishter knows you. So what is it? Even in the womb, the ubra, the fetus that heard this, calmed down. Nafek mina Rabbi Yechanan. Who was the fetus that was born? This was Rabbi Yechanan. There was a tzaddik already in his mother's womb. Another incident, Tahi Ubra Darcha, Ubra, that smelled and became desperate to eat. Also, they came to Rab Chanina, so the same thing, Amalahu, he said to them, L'chushula, whisper to her and see if she'll accept it. V'lo yilchasha, and she did not accept it. She had to eat. Kari aleh, so they said the pasuk on her, that this fetus is Zayru Rishoim Merechem, that a Rasha becomes strange to the Eibishter even in his mother's womb. Nofik Mina, who was born, what child was born from her? Shapsoi, a fellow by the name of Shapsoi, Otzar Pedi. And in his lifetime, he went and he would hoard fruits, hold it for himself, and through this, the price of fruits in the market went up. So already in his mother's womb, we see that he wanted to eat and he didn't calm down even after they told him that it was Yom Kippur on that day.